Hi, my name is Julie Wagner. This is Educational Research Proposal, AEP803, Summer 2013. My topic that I chose was what is the effects of an inclusive classroom? I have been a classroom teacher for 14 years. I've supported many special educational classrooms. Pulling students out to work with the interrelated teacher in small class settings was used for core time for many years. In recent years, methods have changed. Special needs students, or SEN, are mainstreamed in the regular education classroom during core time. SEN students are supported by an interrelated teacher or support staff during that time. Some of my sub-questions were, how do we as educators help SEN students be successful? What is our role as a classroom teacher or interrelated teacher in a mainstream classroom? Is co-teaching existing in a class within a class? And how do students feel about their education? Are the students' needs being met in regards to their IEP? Do the students feel they fit in socially at school? What stress is brought to the classroom teacher? So with my literature map, with my topic of effects of an inclusive classroom, through the literature that I reviewed, I came up with 4 topics: professional development and pre-service training, teacher collaboration, teacher perceptions, and student perceptions. And you will see at the end of my proposal, I have added all the references that I used for these 4 categories. So during my literature review, I thought it was most important to first define what is an inclusive classroom. An inclusive classroom is where students with special needs are educated right along with their normal developing peers. This should consist of a very natural environment where all students are allowed to grow socially and academically. There should be very little pullout for special educational needs students. This may happen when an intervention is in place, but not during core time. As I reviewed the literature of inclusive classrooms, it was clear to see that there are many advantages to having all students taught in the same classroom. Studies over time have shown that all students benefit socially from being active in an inclusive classroom. Although there are a lot of advantages, there are also disadvantages. Teachers are always not prepared in training to take on such a diverse classroom. There is a lack of collaboration between the staff, especially between classroom teachers and the interrelated teachers. Some teachers feel they do not have administrative support. The question is, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? And ultimately, what is best for our students? When looking at the history of special educational trends over time, traditionalists believed that SEN students should be pulled out during core instruction to a special classroom where they would be instructed with peers of their like ability. Inclusive education has become common in schools throughout the United States as a result of the Individuals with Disability Act, or IDEA. With the development of No Child Left Behind, inclusion gained a lot more popularity and focus. Researchers sought to prove this was the best way to educate all students at various levels. As a result of these mandates for inclusion, Fult and Ronaldo state that there is a slow but steady increase of students with educational needs receiving educational services within the regular classroom. We as educators have seen over time the classrooms have changed greatly in ability levels and diversity. NCLB increased school accountability for the performance of students with disabilities and mandated inclusion of students with disabilities and required access, or they should be required access to the general curriculum. This was stated by Embry and Kroger. The focus then turned to how do we make this happen so that all students are successful with the general education classroom. In the literature I reviewed, Many different approaches were discussed. One teach, one assist, one teach, one observe, station teaching, alternative teaching, parallel teaching, and team teaching. The classroom teacher and the support teacher or staff have to decide which will work for them and their students. Despite this being an issue with the inclusion, there seems to be an overwhelming support that inclusion is the best practice for all students at any academic level. The first thing that I looked at was professional development. 89.6% of participants in a study done by Evan and Hong indicated that there was a lack of training to successfully implement inclusion in their classroom. When teachers are not properly trained to meet the needs of all students, many stressors can be added to their job. The quality of inclusion programs established in schools may suffer as a result of not offering additional training for teachers. This was found by Fote and Ronaldo. I do see that within my training of, 14, 15 years ago, we didn't really have the training on how to focus on such a diverse classroom, and that bringing on a level of stress added to the job that you already do. And looking at pre-service training, so teachers that are actually in college going through the courses, it was found that special education teachers are normally given the education needed during college courses to accommodate special needs students. Leads regular teachers to spend a lot of time gathering information on teaching such a diverse classroom. Fuchs found that teachers felt college did not prepare them in any way, shape, or form. As teachers are being called upon to teach all students, it is essential that they are being trained adequately. And that was stated by Caskey in 2008. Teacher collaboration. More heads together is better than one. In a study done by Allison in 2011, it was found that most special education teachers believed that their role was limited in an inclusive setting. Special ed teachers stated that what they felt when they were going into a classroom to support or co-teach, that some teachers became very territorial over their classroom, which made it very difficult for the special educational need teacher to do the job that was required. It has been found that if a positive work environment between teachers and other support staff has to be in place for inclusion to work. And then looking at which methods work best, it's been stated that co-teaching is the best method to use in an inclusive classroom, but not always a method that works. Teachers perceive inclusion, the more support they have, the better perception they have to it. When they're lacking building support, they get very frustrated and do not want to implement it in their classroom. Fote and Ronaldo found the most endorsed method of teaching was co-teaching, and also teacher perceptions of budget. Are there enough people to help them with what they are doing? Support staff and that kind of thing in place. Also, time and collaboration and planning were a major issue. Conley and Hasslitter found that when knowledge level was high, so was the confidence levels of teachers. They were more confident to implement this in their classroom. Student perceptions was the last issue that I looked at. SEN students have the right to be mainstreamed with their same-aged peers. Students want their input to be valued. How do they feel about the methods that are being used? And are they excelling socially and academically? Perception among students regarding classroom teachers, if they feel that they're being negatively treated, then they don't really have the room to grow. Peer relationships also in this study were found that they had better relationships with all students, and they didn't feel that they were being negatively affected by other students. So methodology, I looked at these things. As a classroom teacher of 14 years, I feel a need to determine what impact inclusive classrooms have on teachers and students. Over the years of my teaching, I have had students pulled out for core instruction and with the last few years have participated in inclusive classrooms. I want to learn how teachers and students respond to an inclusive classroom, and I hope to find that teachers and students have a positive attitude towards an inclusive classroom. The purpose of the study was to determine if using the methods of inclusion is effective for teachers and students. My data collection, I would gain permission from the building principal and parents of students that I would be looking at. I would use a survey and also face-to-face interviews. And all information that was collected would be stored in a locked file cabinet in my classroom. My data analysis would be a T-chart of each question that was asked. The answers would be posted in relation to pros and cons. I would be documenting the responses, and I would also be listening to the video recording of the interviews and documenting those pros and cons on the T-chart for each question. To validate and make sure my data is accurate, I would voice record the interviews and play them back as many times as needed to make sure I am understanding what was said in its full context. To make sure I am accurately understanding the responses to the survey questions, I may have to go back and ask for clarification. To ensure reliability, I will use two different types of research. One type will be survey and the other will be face-to-face interviews. My ethical concerns would be that participants may find an ethical concern in some of the questions being sensitive to the school in which their child attends or the place of work if it were a teacher. The researcher will do everything they can to keep the identity and answers confidential. Limitations for the study may include that the study group could be too small, it may not reflect the feeling of an overall district, and it may also be too small a group of special needs students within a school. These are the references that I used in my literature review. I hope that you enjoyed my presentation.